Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to have you here today. My name is Cyndy McDonald, and I am the host of this live streaming show that I do once or twice a month. I am an educator first and foremost, but I'm also a businesswoman, a solopreneur, and now I'm the producer of these shows. And it gives me an opportunity to bring experts to you that talk about things that are pertinent to the work you do with students and families and things that just we care about. And they are frank, honest conversations about things with people who know. So I'm so excited to have everybody in this webinar with me today. And as you're coming in, put your name and your location and your state. And then also if you just put down whether it's a red state or a blue state. Now I know that's not totally descriptive because I live in California. I'm in a very, very blue state, but I'm in a very, very red area of California. So but it is helpful because we're going to talk about navigating this with families that we work with and how we can help uh, those conversations. And we're going to give you some tools and some data on navigating politics in the campus experience. My guests for today are Christine Bowman. She's the Assistant Vice President of Southwestern University. Christine and I have known each other for a very long time. We've done a lot of things together. So, Christine, I'm glad to have you here. We also have Lauren Sefton. She's the Director of International Admissions at Rhodes College, and she's coming to us remotely. She is like in transit, and she is joining us. So, Lauren, I'm glad to have you here today. And then Cathy Finks, the Executive Director of Admissions at the College of Wooster, is with us today. And we're glad to have you here too, Cathy. And Whitney is a fellow independent educational consultant, and she's a founder, owner of WB College Consulting, and she is in the lovely, wonderful state of Maine, correct? And so we're glad to have all of you here today. And before we get started, thank you everybody that's here. You can see we've got people in New Hampshire, California, San Francisco, more people from Maine, Massachusetts, just wonderful representation. I think I see Monica is here. I know she's in Switzerland. It's like much later at night for her. So glad to have everybody here. Before we get started, let's go ahead and do some brief introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the role you have at your school or your organization. So Christine, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Cyndy. And hello, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Christine Bowman. I serve as the Assistant Vice President of Admission at Southwestern University, which is located in Georgetown, Texas, a very red state, but a very purple city. This is my 32nd year in higher education. I love college admission. I have been the former chair of the Colleges That Change Lives Board of Directors, along with Lauren and Cathy. We have served that organization for many years, and we're excited to kind of share some reflections on politics in the college admission with you today. So thank you for joining us. Lauren?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Sefton, and I am, as Cyndy mentioned, Director of International Admission at Rhodes College, a liberal arts and sciences college in Memphis, Tennessee. I am originally from New Jersey, at the time in a very blue part of the country and of the state. And then I went to Rhodes as an undergraduate student, fell in love with the school and the city, and never left. So, and have worked with a domestic U.S. group as well as working with international groups, and have had the pleasure of traveling with all of the ladies on the screen. It's so much fun. We have the best time connecting and working and supporting your students and meeting with you on the roads. Cathy?
Cathy Finks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here at the end of summer as we're about to kick off and do a whole new cycle again. But I've had the pleasure of being at the College of Wooster for over 20 years, which is a lifetime for someone in an admissions profession. But I've been very blessed to have been at an institution that kind of what its mission is still what they're saying and doing, even in today's day and world when things are constantly evolving and changing. And so hopefully we can have a great conversation and we can bring the perspective of that history, especially with all of us on this call, this female heavy call, which I love. We have a lot of historical knowledge and we've seen a lot and we've seen the ebbs and flows. And so we're excited to be here to really talk about where we are and where we think we're going.
And Whitney.
And I'm Whitney Bruce. I'm an IEC in the Portland, Maine area. And I've been in private practice for 20 years. I also have some background in admissions and in school counseling. So I've been in this space for my entire career. And for IECA, I currently chair the Government Relations Committee, and I've done the same. I've been a member of the HECA Government Relations Committee and the New England ACAC. So I've been heavily steeped in the politics component of higher education for quite some time.
That's great. That's great. And also, just to give all of you a little bit of background about me, something you may not know is that I have also worked in the public schools. I worked as a school counselor. I've worked at a middle school. If you work at a middle school, you can work anywhere. And I worked with the AVID program for many years, and then have been an IAC, for many years as well. I also teach for the UCLA College Counseling Certificate Program, and I pleasure of having many of my students join us on these Friday forums. So let me share my screen. We're going to dig into this. This is a session we presented at HECA. So things have changed though. And that's kind of our message right now, is that there is no constant at this stage and time of the history, and looking and being agile and adapt is one of the things that we have to be able to do. So let me switch here, and we're going to go here. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this. Okay, so, but this presentation will be on my website. I always provide all the information. So you'll get show notes, and the recording will also be on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, please do, because I have over 800 subscribers. When I reach 1,000, then I can monetize my channel. So I am getting so close. So subscribe to my channel and you get all the updates as we publish them. All right, so let's start here. We did our introductions, and we're going to kind of lay the groundwork.
Beautiful. Thanks, Cyndy. So it's important to know that we all came together, as at least Lauren, Cathy, and I work and live in red or redder states, but we have the great privilege of working in environments that support diversity of students and faculty, independent ideas, and the benefits of growing through the experience of differing viewpoints. And that's really the foundation for the start of our presentation today. We are not here to change your political views at all. And this presentation is not about how you are going to change your clients' political point of views. But we do want you to know some of the things that we're experiencing and your families may ask you about in this very unique political time, and the impacts that some of these changes might have on your students and families, and therefore your guidance as you're working with them through their college selection process. Cathy?
Yeah, and so I think just to give a little bit more background, as working professionals, especially at small liberal arts schools that are steeped in research, you're out on the road, you're hearing about what students are asking questions, what parents are asking questions when you're talking to IECAs, and what are they hearing from families. And so we got the sense, obviously last fall, that a lot was happening with the political climate, and we really wanted to know, well, anecdotally, we're hearing about where students, how their views might be affecting their college selection. And then I think it was Lauren and I were both at the same conference in the fall. Cyndy, if you want to go ahead a slide. And we heard a presentation by the arts and science presentation, and they quoted an arts and science study that happened in October. So remember where we were in October of 24. But it really showed that 1 in 4 students who are at the age of, they're college-bound students, are ruling out institutions because of the political climate or the political state that they were in. And so that reinforced to us that we're just in a very different climate right now. And so what does that really look like? What should we be? How should we be talking about our institutions? How should we be working with families? And so that's kind of where we started. And so we want to showcase just a few more slides in terms of what data we have, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of things. So Lauren or Christine.
Thank you. So what you see here is some research from an organization called College IQ. They surveyed just under 700 students from a diverse political background, and really kind of pretty divided equally between those that maybe identify as no political preference, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And they were able to speak to students from 49 states and the District of Columbia and gather this information. And the percentage of students that expressed that they had concerns in a variety of areas. And I know this data may appear a little small, so I'll put some context behind it. The first column that you see is guns. 63% of the students reported that gun laws may have an impact on their college choice, where that college choice is, if there were gun laws surrounding it. The next thing you see is 46% and DEI. Then in the middle, 44% and LGBTQIA, 35% and abortion, and 33% and politics. Now, as all three of our institutions are private schools, there may be some leeway that we have in regard to some state laws in our states in regard to some of these things. But some of them, especially in the climate that we are in right now, are going to be very firm. As an example, in Texas, we are a right to carry state. But as a private institution, Southwestern is able to say it is right to carry, but not on our campus. But for many individuals, they hear some of these laws and they automatically assume that it applies broadly, and therefore may make a decision based on an institution, regardless of what that institutional philosophy may be. And so I think it's important to make sure your families are asking questions of the institution themselves as to how these personal values, which are very important for students, and I think becoming more important for students to raise, may have an impact on the locations that they select.
And for those of you that work with international students, Monica, I think you're in Switzerland. We've got some other international folks in the audience as well. I'm guessing especially the gun culture of the US, or the headlines that people are reading about, comes as no surprise for most of our international students. I will say that is a question that I field a lot about: how do I feel safe in the US? And then how does that look? What does that look like from state to state, region to region, as well? So this is applicable. This survey was just domestic students, but I think you can imagine that these similar concerns are oftentimes parlayed with an international audience too, especially when a lot of the legislation or a lot of the culture may feel very, very different than what a family is coming from or experiencing personally where they are. So on the next slide, we've talked about what some of the values that might be important to your families and your students as they're considering their options. The very first slide talked about at least a quarter of students are ruling out schools based solely on states alone. And I thought that this survey, there was again, the same art and science group, some different criteria in their organization. But essentially they're saying, yes, there are some states that are a little bit more, shall we say, polarizing in the results of their surveys about being ruled out. And so 15% or more prospective students said they ruled out certain states like California and Texas and Florida. Um, the website that we can link to later and show you, you can actually divide this out by conservative and liberal viewed students as well. But it was interesting because when asked, should these socio-political issues actually be talked about amongst colleges when they're advertising to students, a lot of people said no, except for the topic I'm really interested in. So that probably doesn't surprise you that teenagers only want to hear about the things that they want to know, and we magically need to know exactly what that is. But a lot of people said, nah, stay kind of neutral, don't take a big stand. Oh, except for this one topic that I'm really passionate about. Then I want to hear this. I want the institution to make a stand. I want to see it advertised broadly. So, one of those darned if you do, darned if you don't statements that college administrations are trying to navigate for a lot of reasons, but certainly in trying to share information with families and students about their views. The next slide is a different poll. This was through Ancora, and they looked at the most and least desired states that a student would consider as a destination. They know that if the student wants to go out of state, what are the most and what are the least desired states. The reason I share this is I thought it was super interesting that, again, mixed information, or this will come as no surprise in the it depends world of college admission, but New York, California, Texas, Florida were on both lists as most desirable locations and least desirable locations. So the answer to so many admission questions of it depends, this falls in that category as well. Whitney, I'll pass it over to you to how we get, now that we have a little bit of a framework of where students and families might be coming from, at least on a big picture scale with some data, let's talk about how do we get to the more granular conversation.
And this is always interesting to me because I ask these kinds of questions of both parents and students, and I ask them separately, and I ask them when families are together and can sit and have a conversation about it. And we talk in general about comfort level. How comfortable are you? How much do you want to be challenged by people who are bringing different experiences? And then I also like to talk about and ascertain whether the student is bringing a specific issue that's really important to them, or whether it's a general feeling. And more often than not, within my practice, it's a general feeling. But I do have some students who might say, I am a member of the LGBTQIA community, and there are certain places in which I'm not sure I'm going to be safe. And so I frame my conversations with some families different from the way I frame my conversations with other students. But we do talk about what it means to go to college in a blue city in a red state, and how that could be different from going to college in an area where you do feel that you have very different views from everyone around you. And we also talk about sort of the power in some of those purple places of a student's vote and activism. That when you, as a college student, go someplace else, you do have the opportunity to change your voter registration to your campus. And that too is one way to make a difference. I think as I've talked more with parents, I'm discovering that they're thinking more long term as well. And they're actually also looking at, if my child goes to school in a different region of the United States and one that I'm not comfortable in, what happens if they stay there for a job? And what happens if they live there in a parent's mind forever? And that too is an interesting conversation that, again, requires asking questions to get to the root at what the family is worried about. Are they worried about safety? Are they worried about general comfort on campus and having conversations with a variety of students? Are they worried about a particular issue? Are they worried about geography in a totally different way and they're choosing to define it politically because that's an easy box for them? And yes, they often say, I won't let my child go to Tennessee unless she gets into Vanderbilt. In the same way, they say, I'm very concerned about college cost unless it's Stanford. Um, so you have to ask questions and encourage people to think about it. And I found that sometimes students' views shift over the course of a year or year and a half as well. And things that feel really important at the beginning don't feel important as other things rise in importance for them.
Yeah,
I think
I
that
would go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that those what if questions are so hard, right, Whitney? Because you know this is an anxious time for families anyways. And so sometimes you can see the student or the family getting into those larger, well, what if this? And what if I live there 10 years from now? What? And so it's just also helping them to come back to the moment of where they are and what we can talk about. And I like your idea. I like your suggestion of really having them do that thoughtful process, well, where are we now? Where can what can we control? And so I think it's a great reminder.
Mhm. I have found, again, I'm in a very conservative area, and oftentimes what parents will say, well, they can go to this school or that school, but I'm not sending them to Berkeley, for example, because of the fear that Whitney just shared. It's like, oh, they're going to come back, or they're going to stay there, or they're going to come back and they're going to be changed. And what I try to do is remind parents, like, you've been raising this child with your standards and your values for 18 years. And do you think that going to one place is going to fundamentally change that person that you've raised? And going to some of the other points is they're going to bring those viewpoints, and that might be very valuable, not only for your student, but to participate on that campus. So digging, as Whitney, as you said, digging into what their fear is a key part of being able to open their minds a little bit and kind of refocus the conversation.
Lauren, do you want to start us off on this slide?
Sure, I can. So there are lots of ways to try to help shift that conversation, and knowing your students and having the opportunity and trust to open up those conversations is a really big part of it. A more broad one that I got to many of you might already be familiar with is something called the blind college fair. There's probably a more politically correct terminology for it. But I have participated in this virtually. I have also done one in person, and I've heard other people do them in person as well. But this is a case where college representatives share their school's information without specific identifying characteristics. So we're not sharing the name of the school or the exact location of the school, or maybe even the region of the school, but we're sharing character and values and things that make us unique. First of all, it's a great exercise for the admission counselor to think about ways that we really stand out from other institutions that might seem at first glance kind of similar. But it allows families and students to explore options without some of the biases in geography or distance that might exist. And then they can start asking those questions. So in a virtual setting, that was a series of colleges that presented 2 minutes. Maybe it was less than that because it went pretty quickly. So I think it was less than that to share characteristics, and people could be thinking about which schools might be good fits for them based on program or, again, shared community values. And then at the end, it was a surprise unveiling. If you liked what I had to say, come learn more about my institution. And so it gave us a chance to do that virtually. And then the in-person option was you'd still set up a table but you would list characteristics, and you'd have your banner would be folded over, or you wouldn't have a table banner that had your name on it, so you couldn't see it, and you didn't have regular brochures out. You could use a whiteboard or a big poster that just gave general information and characteristics about size and community and values. And students and families would walk around and go, oh, that sounds really interesting. That sounds like a program that would be a good fit for my interests or academics or extracurriculars. And then the last 30 minutes, you unveiled, you put out your table banner, and you put out your brochures, and it was surprise. You didn't even know we existed, and now you've got this amazing connection with the school. So that can be a great way. Again, good test for admission counselors to think about how they present themselves in a way that is unique without saying our names, but also a way for your families to maybe move away from some of their own biases, but also move away from just that name brand recognition and explore outside the box a little bit.
I actually do a version of this after hearing about this a half dozen or more years ago. And I've created my own profiles that have removed all of that information that I have my students early on in the list development process go through. I give them a variety of different ones and have them go through and identify the things that are standing out to them and that are powerful before they know the names. And it's proven to be a great way to get beyond or easy assumptions.
I'm going to jump down to the last bullet point, using the admission office as a conduit to connect with current students. Everybody, you all know we exist, but sometimes the students are so hesitant to use us as a tool and a resource. I have just had a conversation with our president because I was curious as to how she would answer a question that I've probably received a half a dozen times in the last month. What is Southwestern doing about DEI? Because it's such a big topic in Texas. And I was very proud to say that while many institutions in our state are closing their DEI offices, are eliminating student organizations, that Southwestern is continuing on this journey. We want students to have safe spaces where they grow and thrive, whatever that organization may be. And students won't know that if they won't ask us those questions. That in this litigious society, maybe we're not going to be able to promote them on our websites in the same way that we used to be able to, but we do have them. And our Pirates for Pride LGBTQ organization has one of the largest fundraisers of a student organization every year. And so I hope you will empower your students that feel some of these conflicts between, maybe they discovered us in one of those blind college fairs, but then discover, oh, but you're in Texas and these qualities aren't so great and I don't feel comfortable there. Maybe you actually would feel comfortable here. And our proximity to Austin allows you, which is the state capital, to be a change maker, to go and fight for those things that you feel so strongly about through internships or through time at the Capitol. So utilize your resources in the admission team. Make sure your students are asking those questions that are so very valuable to them. And if possible, we'll connect your students to current students that can share their reflections, thoughts, and experiences, and hopefully alleviate concerns. Or maybe, on the other hand, give your students comfort or comfortable information to say, it's a great school, but this isn't the right place for me. And that's an okay part of this journey as well. Lauren, I think you have the next slide.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the constructive engagement?
Sure. So we held a similar themed session at a professional conference, and one of the audience members brought this to our attention as a possible, that his families were seeing this as a possible litmus test for universities to see if whether or not they signed on to the American Association of College and University statement on a call for constructive engagement. So we left this in as a kind of a thinking point. I feel like so many things have happened since then, and colleges have responded in different ways, that this might not be quite as present or top of mind as it was kind of earlier earlier this year, but certainly seeing who is active. Now, again, remember back to that original slide early on where we talked about students not wanting colleges to necessarily make a statement unless it's their topic of choice. But in some ways, this could be a way just to, in terms of federal oversight, and what colleges might be thinking. It was something brought up, so we're sharing it as a possible.
And there are more,
you may love this idea, you may not.
right. But it gives you a resource, and more colleges have been signing this since then. Is that correct? That they're
yes, certainly more colleges have been signing it since it first existed. Again, I think the momentum has slowed a little bit on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So here's where we're at. Questions we asked our students. So go ahead.
So Christine brought up the point that we all, again, your students are your best resources. Our students are our best resources in connecting with your students to get the real story about their experience, their true lived experience. And so as part of the research for this, we also asked some of our current students some questions, and we'll be able to share those. But these are possible questions that you might want to ask some of your previous clients to share a perspective on, or this might help guide you in some of the questions you would want to ask, and ways to frame the conversation with your families now about this as well. I'll second to review it. So the next couple of bits are just some answers that we have received from students.
Whoops.
That we've received from our students from different parts of the region, particularly usually coming from more blue states coming to red state schools, for example. And I think a lot of this goes back to one of the things that Whitney was talking about, where you're really trying to figure out, do students want to attend a school where they are in an echo chamber surrounded by people who have the same values or the same political beliefs that they do? Or do you want to find a place where you are strengthening your own personal values through civil discourse and discussion? And then you're focused on, how do I find the places that are going to have those kinds of civil discussions, or maybe some dispassionate conversations about otherwise very passionate topics, right? You want students who are passionate about things, but can engage with others around the table that have perhaps differing viewpoints, and so they can learn and grow from each other. Those are two really different ways of thinking about a college experience, a college classroom, a college cafeteria table, and what those conversations look and sound like, in understanding those perspectives and differences. I think the next slide is
we pulled a couple of students too, and I love the bottom answer that one of our students gave, that there's so much more to campus than just the politics and the political discourse. And when you want to stop talking about politics, guess what? You really can on a college campus. You can unplug. And I thought, oh, that's such a good reminder, because I think sometimes when we go down these rabbit holes, or when students are really questioning, or if they really want to be part of it, but they can turn it off, right? And that's the beauty of a lot of our especially this college is on here, that we have robust programs across the campus in terms of social life and community life, and we want students to engage. And so, can they go out and drive a vote, or can they go out and be part of a rallying cry when they want to, or be part of a political group? Yes, but it's not going to dominate their life. If they don't want to, they can always shut it off. So I thought that was also a good reminder from a student who gave that quote. But going back to what Lauren said, I really think that I think sometimes students lose track of many of our students, your students, when they're in high school. They are in their own kind of bubble, right? Surrounded by people that have a lot of the same ideals, that are from similar regions, similar backgrounds. And so what is it going to look like? And they sometimes can't comprehend what that's going to look like to be on a different campus where there's different views. And so, the top quote I'll let you read, but she's a student. She's one of our tour guides, Sarah. And she was really, she was seeking a place where she could actually have that banter, where there was going to be both political viewpoints. And I thought that's so refreshing in today's day and age when that's not always something that's sought. It's just about believing what you believe. And she really wanted to be at a place where she could really be challenged by what she thought she believed by people who did not share her views. And so, just a good reminder that sometimes students aren't even aware that they are in their own bubble in high school or in their own community, whatever that looks like, and then coming to a college campus and trying a new collaborative approach to the world.
And it's important to know, kind of like I said in the very beginning, that colleges aren't there to necessarily change their minds, ideals, or values. But I think one of the things we struggle with right now in this country is a respectful discord. And I think that is one of the goals that our colleges all try to create. I often tell students and families, you come to us as this kind of perfect piece of silly putty. You're in that half egg and you're malleable, but you are clean and pristine. And then over the course of 4 years, I hope you come out of the egg container of silly putty and that you get pulled and you get shaped and you become this kind of amoeba looking element. Sometimes that may mean that you hear a different point of view and you hear it, you respect it, but you recognize that it's not you and you remain valued as to the student that you came to our campuses as. But for other students, I think sometimes when they're surrounded by different thoughts and different views, it's the opportunity to then begin to think, is this how I really feel? I've grown up with these values that were instilled in me. Is that what I truly believe? And sometimes they do morph and shape and modify a little bit. And so I always tell my students, if you are the same piece of silly putty 4 years later, we have failed you. That does not mean you're going to become a different person, but I hope that you will have heard different ideas. I hope that you will see value in other thoughts and perspectives and respect those that have them, because we are a space and a culture and a country that does not all think alike, but we have to be able to work together for the better part of our communities and our humanity. And when we have different views to learn from, it really does make us grow. And I'm proud at a liberal arts college that sort of idea is really festered. I think it's easy to do in our smaller classrooms. It's harder to do when there's 400 people in your classroom. And I think the social organizations can overlap and maybe even sometimes come together in a way that you wouldn't assume that two social organizations could collaborate. And so I'm appreciative of that for all of our schools, but especially at Southwestern.
I would kind of put a capstone on all of that. And I think this comes back to the whole fundamental of what we're all doing. And it's the whole premise of education, particularly higher education. And being able to come back and have that diversity of thought and expression. And as you said, Christine, be able to show it as the student says, respectfully and have an open mind and an open heart, and then be able to draw your own conclusions. That's the power of higher education. And that's what we want to encourage our students to do, so that they can step out of their comfort zone. And for their families, their parents, sometimes that's really hard. But to be there to support them so that they can step out of their comfort zone a little bit too. So. All right, so we don't have all the balls and we don't have control over everything. So what else?
I'll start this one off. When we did this presentation in May, there was a lot of change going on. And I think one of the really important things to know is we're giving this information today. We don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now. We don't know what's happened 6 months from now or even a year from now. We have all reflected with each other that we have spent more time changing websites, talking with lawyers, reinventing scholarship programs, questioning whether the work that we are doing can still be done in quite the same way. We're now going to have to report different data to the federal government. And so when we have reflected on this government intervention, which is really different, we questioned what sort of impact ultimately might this have on students and families. And I think we're fortunate that the endowment tax that was originally being presented in such a extreme fashion has been rolled back. And while the endowment tax still exists, it does not appear today, and I will use that word very cautiously, does not appear today that it is going to be as detrimental at some institutions as they were really fearful it would be. But as it has been for many years, grants like Pell and the supplemental education opportunity grants are constantly being watched. Some years they have been fortunate enough to have an increase, but I think every year we all hold our breath whether they will continue. And if they don't, what impact will that have not only on the institutions, but the students we serve? That is a lot of financial aid for many, many of our students. We've reflected on work study being minimized. We know that parent loans now are going through a substantial change. And for some families, this may mean they have to figure out how to fund education in a different way. Instead of utilizing government supported loans, they're now going to go out into the private loan industry. And that may become the wild, wild west. And is that good for us or bad for us? I know we've had the conversation with so many of our students going on to graduate and professional school and loan limitations now being presented. What does that mean for them in their next phase? And what choices will they make at the undergraduate level so that they can continue to have those hopes and dreams at the graduate level? Data collection seems to be top of mind right now. That's one of the most recent conversations that is happening. And what does that mean for all of our offices? How do we have to collect data? And then how are we reporting it out? And then finally, the implication of international travel bans and visa disruptions. And we know that is having an impact on many, many campuses across the country. If you are not aware, Duke in the last couple of weeks just took a ton of students off of the wait list at the very last minute. I can only imagine, and this is my speculation, not any proven information, that maybe they discovered that their international population was going to have a significant hit, and they are beginning to seek additional domestic students to fill their class along the way. If that happens, that's going to change the landscape of who gets admitted and where and at what phase in this cycle. And so what may feel like a little small change can have a significant rippling impact on all of our institutions, because if it starts at the top, it's liable to trickle down all the way to the bottom of the institutional chain.
And I think that's a great point with the trickle down effect. And, obviously this conversation when we were originally presenting it was more about the political landscape from a student's point of view, but how this becomes relevant is that our institutions, while flexible, aren't built to have so many levers touched and pulled all at one time. And so what's happening is it's putting strains on our institutions. We have limited budgets. And so if you are reading the Chronicle, if you're in higher ed landscape, you know that there's been cuts at many including Duke that you just mentioned. Anyways, I won't go through the list, but there's been many cuts on college campuses in terms of both faculty or program or staff. And so even if your student, you're like, well, visas don't affect the student I'm currently advising. The number of visas that are not getting approved might affect what a school is doing with their admissions practices. It might be affecting the services that they're able to offer, because as they have to cut staff on that college campus, are they cutting programs that your students might have been interested, or let alone just the community building that happens on. Anyways, so you see my point. I could go down the rabbit hole. But I think the bigger thing is to know is sometimes you look at this and say, well, my student in this case, or my students I'm advising this year aren't Pell eligible, so how does that affect me? But again, it's the multitude of levers that we're all trying to grapple with, decisions that are being made all at one time or over a short course of time that are having dramatic, and I really use that word very dramatically, but dramatic impacts on our college campuses that we're all trying to touch. And one that Christine mentioned, but I'll just put it out there again, the amount of resources that I know that all three of us, but we were at a larger conference, the amount of resources that we're putting towards in terms of legal fees to make sure that we're keeping up as appropriate, because we do want to follow the letter of the law, whether we agree with it or not, is a lot. And again, that affects budgets and where we are. So enough said, but this is not a stagnant list. It hasn't, it's changed since we wrote this, a little bit over a couple months ago, and it will continue to change. And that is going to affect our students that you're working with and our students who are applying.
And that volatility is challenging for so many different reasons. A lot of these questions originally came up with the big beautiful bill, but just because that has gone through the legislature doesn't mean that these questions aren't going to continue to come up again and again and again. So nothing seems to ever be completely resolved, and that causes stress and strain as colleges end up being more reactive rather than proactive. And I think I would also ask from an IEC perspective to help your families ask thoughtful questions, but understand the importance of grace when admission offices maybe don't know the answer or don't have the answer or give you information at one point in time that then changes 6 months down the road. And we know that that's frustrating, and believe me, it is frustrating on our end as well. But the answers do change and the stances do change because these questions are constantly changing as well. So grace should be the word of the day, I think.
I think that's very true. Whitney, I'd like to hear your take on some of this from your background experience in working in government relations, and you've watched, this aspect over the last few years. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think my college colleagues have touched on a lot of it, which is that this spring, the worst possible outcomes weren't fully realized. That we didn't end up in worst case scenario, but there's so much uncertainty. And these issues will continue to resurface year in and year out. And the implementation and the sort of the implementation of the various laws and executive orders and regulations and the interpretations of them are still very much up in the air. And I think Lauren's comment about grace, it was so critical. One of the things that I worry about the most, well, there are a lot of things. I worry about all of these things individually, but I worry for colleges and universities about the impact on campus morale overall and the way that trickles down to the student experience, that the uncertainty about jobs and about cuts and about programs and majors and safety and everything is just that's the piece that's keeping me up at night is those small in between moments and worrying about some of the things that make such colleges so special may be diminished in ways that we don't even know until after they're gone.
I agree. But there is hope. So we have good news. Who wants to take that?
Whitney, I think this one's yours. You get to be the deliverer of the great news.
Yes.
All right. So, I think every time I have a conversation with a student about politics, or for most of my students, where we end up is that politics isn't the be all end all for them. They're often using it as a proxy to help them cut the clutter down in their mind. And just as we talked about at, I think, Cathy, it was your slide, like you don't have to talk about politics all the time, that there are all sorts of other things going on a college campus and all sorts of other things that are important to a student experience. And for us as counselors, being able to focus on a lot of those positives can again expand the conversation rather than contract it into a red state, red city, red campus, blue campus dichotomy. So students are still really looking at the things that students have been looking at for generations, right? Does this college have my program? Am I going to get a job? Do I like to be near the beach? Is it warm or cold? Am I going to learn with people that I perceive as cool and interesting? And from people who I perceive as cool and interesting. And those things still matter to kids. And so I think putting all of those pieces together and having students think about what is truly critical to them can again help them cut through the noise.
I agree. Look, political environments at the very bottom and academic opportunities is at the very top, and that continues. That's been a trend and a purpose for many, many years. I know I always have my students, I don't just ask them what they want, I have them prioritize. I give them a list of 15 categories and they have to put it in order from most important to least important. So yeah, they might, the athletic spirit, the climate, those might be important to them, but tell me what's most important. And it's nice to see this reflected in data, because anecdotally, we often see this as well. So going back to, it's all about the right fit, whether, for each student, that's going to be unique and different for each family. And as the slide says, it's the most important aspect of our work. We have a question that I'm going to go back to, and I think, let's see, I think there's, yeah. So we're going to come back to this in just a second, but someone asked, what is the best way to learn how each school is impacted by the new government relations or regulations or taxes? How do we find that out? Do we call the admissions office? What do you recommend?
I think it's going to vary so much that it's like all good admission answers. It depends. I would ask your admission counselor, but I will also tell you, I have 3 new admission staff members that have just joined my team, and they may not know the answer. And so to quote my dear friend Lauren, it may be okay to give a little grace if that person doesn't know the answer, and ask them to follow up with you or your family if that question is super important. I know the answers, but I also sit at a level in my admission team where those answers are important for me to know, but my brand new admission counselor who's giving the information session might not have as much information today. It's something we're going to empower them with, but in week 2, that may feel a little heavy to cover. Cathy, Lauren, would you all add anything else?
I think having an understanding of why the family is asking that question it's a great question, but how we're affected from a grant or funding level is different than how we're affected from DEI, for example. And so having an understanding of why that question is important to that particular student will help colleges better understand what kind of information to share as well. So making sure that they understand that they're not just asking that question because ChatGPT told them to ask that question. You can help them drill down and figure out why is that important, because it absolutely is. But and forgive me, I know my background changed. I'm in the back of the car. So thank you for giving me some grace, because I had to make a quick change from devices. So thank you.
Oh, we're glad you're still connected, Lauren.
I think too, if you're talking about some of the legislative issues, the Chronicle has done a great job at doing some DEI legislation tracker. I think there are some gun legislation trackers out there. There are some places that are summarizing things at a state by state level, so that's not institution by institution, but it does provide some bigger picture information.
I also know that it's going to vary greatly between big publics, R1 research institutions and small liberal arts colleges like us. When Whitney joined this team, she asked each of us, are science foundation grants, NSF grants impacting you all, and the ability to provide research opportunities for your students? And the answer from all three of us was no. We don't necessarily have that sort of funding driving our research opportunities. I think many of our faculty are celebratory in the fact that they've received those grants, but that's not the whole way in which our research programs exist. And I know College of Wooster is a proud institution in which research opportunities are prevalent. And so it's our institutions that are funding them. But we're very different from an R1 institution, which the answer to that question may be vastly different.
Definitely, definitely. And we have on the screen some links that you can go to. NACAC is very strong in advocacy. If you're not a member of NACAC, I would encourage you to become a member. There's power in our organizations. There's power in joining our voices. And so that's a valuable thing. Being able to look and find your legislator, that's an important aspect too. And what is the 5 Calls app? Lauren, tell us about that.
I'm not paid by 5 Calls. It's a free app that you download onto your phone, and it gives you all sorts of topics that you might be interested in. You select the topic that you are most passionate about calling and talking to your Congress people about for that day. It automatically will connect you to your legislators. It dials it for you. You push the button, but it dials it for you. It gives you a script. So if you're nervous about what to say, this is a way that takes all the guesswork out of it. Now, obviously you can personalize everything. But it's helpful if I just block time out of on my calendar for 5 minutes and say, this is what I'm calling about today. So super, super easy way, especially if you are nervous about talking to people on the phone about something like this.
I love it. I love it. Any other thoughts, comments? Whitney, do you have any other things to?
Sure. Don't underestimate the power of your own voice as a constituent on any issue at any time, because these offices really do care to hear from their constituents. They do keep track of the number of calls on particular issues, and that does move the needle. And, that happens at the state level, which impacts K-12 a little bit more than it impacts higher education, but there are crossover spots that can be critical. So your state level legislators are important to know and reach out to, as well as your federal ones, and sharing with them your thoughts and your opinions and doing it regularly is truly valued. And it's one of the cool parts about democracy in America as it was established and persists.
I think that's a great point to wrap up our session for today. We do have the power of our voice, and every effort is valued and can make a difference. So thank you everyone for being here today. We will be putting contact information, links to the universities, and other resources that you've seen in these slides. The slides will be available on my website as well. So thanks everybody for joining me today. Thank you, Christine, Whitney, Cathy, and Lauren for being here. We're going to be back next week. I'm going to have John Durante. He's a principal at a public New York high school, and he has started a podcast that talking to deans and admissions representatives. And so he's talked to well over 100. So he's going to talk about the tips and things that he's learned. He actually wrote a book about this. He's a student of mine in the UCLA class, and he's a very dynamic, energetic, and how often do you get a principal who will do that? So I'm excited to have him. Murphy Miller is going to come in October. We're going to talk about some of this like admission trends. So that's going to be another important aspect. We're also going to talk in October, I'm working with Jeffrey Neal, and he and I are put into part 1, part 2. We're going to talk about AI and AI literacy, and both for adults, that'll be part 1. So for us, and then how do we share and communicate this to students? So Jeffrey Neal is a counselor at Braided in Brazil, and he is like the thought leader in AI. So he and I are working on that. I also have several other Friday forums that I'm lining up. So I hope you'll join me and spread the word. And ladies, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And everybody that's joined me today, I hope you too have a great weekend. We'll see you back here in another week. So thank you.
Thanks, Cyndy.